Shadows are controlled by lights, and that makes sense. But what if you have dozens or hundreds of lights in a scene? Managing the shadow data can become quite daunting. Fortunately, there are a couple of methods you can use to make this process go more smoothly. And the first method is called global settings. It works like this. Select a light, go into the shadow group, and check Use Global Settings. When you do that, the algorithm might change. We had area shadows selected previously, and we jumped over to Shadow Map. When this is checked, then you're managing the global settings. There's no other place to go and look for the global settings. They're right here. I'll change this back to area shadows, and I'll make a change to one of its rollouts. I'll open up optimizations and turn on transparent shadows. Then I'll select another light source. Over here I've selected spot number 2. Right now it's using ray trace shadows. I'll check Use Global Settings. Now this light is using area shadows and it has transparent shadows on. So any lights that use global settings essentially have their shadow parameters instanced. Lights that do not use the global settings, such as this one, have unique shadow parameters. You can change the global settings on any light that is using the global settings. So if I want to make a change here and say I don't want transparent shadows, that will affect all of the lights that are using the global settings. Another way of managing lights and their shadows is through the Light Lister interface. And you can open that on the Tools menu right here. The Light Lister is like a one-stop shop for managing all of your lights. And the configuration rollout controls what we see in this dialog box. Right now I'm looking at all of the lights. I can select a particular light by clicking on this column, and I see it over in the Modify panel. I'll select f-spot number 1 and I'll turn that light on. Notice that over here the light is currently off. I can turn it on right here, and that checkbox will be updated in the Modify panel. I can also change the modifier. Let's say I want to make the light a bit dimmer. I'll change the multiplier to 0.5, and that updates here. Notice that if you change something in the Modify panel, say I make this 0.75, it doesn't automatically update over here. You have to refresh, and then the change will be updated. You can also set the color of the light, whether it casts shadows or not. You can also set the shadow casting algorithm here. And notice that some of the parameters are grayed out. You can't change the bitmap size of area shadows because they don't use bitmaps, but you can change it here. This is the bias or distance that the shadow is away from the object. This is the sample range, which controls the blurring of the shadow. This is whether or not the shadow supports transparency. This is the shadow integrity and shadow quality. And notice that it supports decay and the distance where the decay begins. Now, I'm not a big fan of decay because I prefer attenuation, but I guess there just isn't enough room in this dialog box to include far and near attenuation controls. You can manage the selected lights collectively here, or you can affect all of the lights with the general settings. Here I can go to General Settings, All Lights, and I can toggle on shadow casting for all the lights by unchecking and then rechecking that. Down here we have some controls that are found in the environment dialog that affect the entire scene. I can go back to all lights, and you'll see that all of the shadows are on now. So use this method to have global control over all of your light sources and many of their shadow parameters. It's also possible to control shadows at the object level. For example, I'll select this chair and go to Object Properties. Here on the General tab, under Rendering Control, notice that there are two checkboxes here for Receive and Cast Shadows. You can toggle these off if you don't want this object to either cast or receive shadows.